Welcome to the Blue Cafe. We bring you stories of faith, love, and devotion. Yeah, just kidding, please help us grow by hitting that like button. Now on to the story. My story. I met my now wife, a former wayward FWW, in 1999 when she was 19 and I was 23. We were each other's first intimate relationship and were married in 2003 in a big wedding in front of all our family members. Things by all accounts were good prior to us being married, and for the first year or so. Very loving, very affectionate, and lots of shared great times. Neither of us thought in a million years that either of us would cheat on the other. After she graduated from college in 2004, a depression started to affect her. She was rejected by company after company that she applied to, and felt directionless, isolated and worthless. She would stay home while I had to go to work, with no friends or support structure nearby. She developed strong suicidal ideations, although never actually attempted anything. Meanwhile, I was finding a lot of fulfillment in the hobby/sport of motorcycle racing, and my time was spent more and more on this. I was concerned about my wife's depression, and was able to put in a good word for her at the company I worked for, which was in a large corporate environment. She interviewed in early 2005 and landed the job, which I thought would surely cure her of her situational depression. Things would soon be looking up, I thought. She was hired along with a male counterpart, around my same age and single, the future AP. They sat adjacent to each other and would interact regularly as a matter of their shared daily work. I myself sat in a cube just a few doors away from both of them, oblivious to the threat that was about to unfold. AP would playfully flirt with my wife, joking with her and making her laugh. He was just a nice guy, she thought. I met him a few times and thought nothing of it other than he was her co-worker. Boundaries were incrementally crossed when my wife openly shared with him some personal information, something to the effect of that I was more interested in my motorcycle than in her. He would drop lines such as, "I wish I had a girlfriend like you and your husband is so lucky." My wife claims that she was so naive that she did not recognize any of these as signals that he was interested in her in a romantic/sexual way, but admits that they both grew more and more emotionally attached. After a few months of this emotional grooming, their boss sent them both on a business trip out of state. They sat next to each other on the plane, and during the flight, her AP initiated what was to be the start of the PA. He took her hand and held it. According to my wife, this was a big surprise and was the first overt indicator that he wanted to take things to the next level. My wife chose not to remove her hand, and by doing so, began the demolition of our marriage and started a chain of events that would forever alter our relationship. After arriving at their destination and meeting with colleagues, my wife and AP got on an elevator to go back up to their respective hotel rooms. Once the door had closed, AP moved over and kissed my wife. As she has described, it was a scene out of a pop romance movie. She again let this happen and went with it. AP then invited her into his room, where they continued to make out, and he took off his pants. As he started to take her pants off, she hesitated. She hadn't been expecting any of this to happen so fast, and wasn't psychologically ready to make that step, to his disappointment and mockery. There was, however, never a firm shutdown of this happening at a later point. They returned from the trip and my wife knew that she had crossed the line. In her mind, it was only a matter of time before I found out and would kick her out. There was no going back. About a week after the business trip, I was staying at work late to finish a big project. Her AP had invited her over to his place while I was working. By her account, she thought they would just talk or maybe make out again. Maybe talk about how it wasn't a good idea to continue things. Once she entered his bedroom, he ripped her panties off, held her arms down forcefully, and penetrated her. Her initial resistance gave way to willing participation. AP climaxed 3 separate times. She came once just from penetration alone, which is something I've never been able to do for her. They cuddled afterwards and then she drove home to me, oblivious as to what had just gone on. It was at this time that their secretive relationship accelerated. Sex on lunch breaks, weekends at his house while I was gone racing, and even him coming over to our apartment on one occasion to screw on our couch. On one occasion even having sex with both me and him on the same day. Her AP was in her ear all day, every day. Villainizing me and doing his best to convince her to leave me. I was the neglectful husband and completely dehumanized. He would love bomb her and she would find it irresistible. She claims she wasn't aware at all how shallow and generic his words were, as she had no previous romantic experience other than me. There were promises of a future together. There were gifts. There were lunchtime getaways to his place for sex. Even a weekly salsa dancing class they would both go to as I worked late. She compared our mature relationship to the excitement of a new relationship, and I was being tested without my knowledge. Every time I would fail to live up to AP in all areas. They began talking about how she would leave me and then start their relationship together in the open. One day about a month or so after their PA started, my wife told me she wanted to move out to her own place once our lease was up on our apartment the following month. I was shocked, blindsided, and went into action mode. I had my complaints about our marriage, specifically that she wasn't supportive of my racing, and that she was too clingy and needed to find some hobby and friends so that I wasn't the only one who had to provide everything to her. She used this as the reason behind her moving out, so that she could learn to be more independent. I signed us up for marriage counseling and took her on an expensive 3-day weekend getaway, showering her with gifts and trying to talk her out of moving out. Still no clue about the affair, but by this time I had my suspicions. I asked repeatedly point blank if she was having an affair, and every time it was denied. There were many signs that I buried and chose to ignore. A few weeks before move-out day, her sister called me and begged me not to go racing that weekend at what was an important event for me. She had recently found out about my wife's affair. My FWW sister was furious at my FWW but wouldn't tell me out of loyalty to her sister. I ignored her sister's pleas, one of my many regrets. That weekend I had a big crash and broke my collarbone. The crash was a turning point for me, and I decided to give up racing for the time being to focus on trying to save my marriage. Move-out day came and went, and I was hit with the reality that this was all real. I think my wife also was hit by a sense of uncertainty and growing ambivalence that was a result of cracks in the facade of AP, but mixed with a sense of excitement fueled by her limerence for him. Her plan, I believe, was to choke our relationship to death, with moving out being the first step, followed by coming out with AP as a sort of rebound relationship. She's framed it today as a plan that her AP pushed her into. At this time, I was calling her and wanting to spend time with her whenever I could to soothe my deep sense of loneliness. She was the only one who could comfort me. I picked her up one day so we could go hang out at my new studio apartment and was telling her about how I wanted her back living with me so badly, that I was going to quit racing, and focus entirely on her and us, and she finally broke down. She confessed to the affair, and my immediate reaction was to tell her that I would forgive her and take her back on the condition that she stopped it. In some way, I was relieved, because I had finally gotten a diagnosis for what had been mysteriously eating away at our marriage. I remember she ran into the bathroom and texted her AP, "I love you no matter what happens." I guess she thought I may be a danger to her and those would be her last romantic words. D-Day was one of the most emotionally upsetting things I've ever lived through. My wife was surprised by my reaction, as she had thought this would be the end, and sounded open to try a recovery. She went over to AP's house and tried to break it off with him, but he groveled, cried and didn't allow her to leave without her agreeing to commit again to leaving me. Her ambivalence would grow every minute that she'd spend with him, and there was at one point an official agreement that we would but every time we'd talk more about it, she would change her mind. It was like being strung along on an emotional torture rack. I wanted to go to HR at work in hopes that they'd fire him so that they wouldn't be together anymore during the day, but I was unsure if my wife would just say that I was the one stalking them and then I'd end up being the one fired. If that happened, then it'd be more out of the picture than if I were to at least be sitting a few doors down. So then there was 2 months of tug of war between her AP and me to win the prize of my wife. I had to be the nice guy, and AP started doing a few things that made my wife second guess him. He lied about getting an STD test so he could have unprotected sex with my wife, and also had told her this voluntarily, as well as telling her he would get prostitutes. He lied about being exclusive with her when she found out he had a second girlfriend on the side. He admitted that he had previously been charged with rape. He would go around town stealing bicycles and openly bragged about this. He lied about his race to get into a prestigious college. He wanted to defile our marital bed by having sex with my wife in it. This guy's character was the lowest of the low, but somehow he would manage to put just the right string of words together that would convince my wife that it was all okay and normal. He was also losing patience with my wife, and started dating a new girl openly in an attempt to make my wife jealous. Finally, once I sensed that my wife would be likely to take my side in any fallout at work, I went to HR, and the decision was to terminate the AP. At this point, AP realized that my wife had finally chosen sides. He packed his stuff up and left, and according to her, they never spoke again. We stayed married, and the following year bought a house together. The next year, we got pregnant. We then moved out of state for a job I took, and had 2 more kids. We are now 16 years post D-Day. I've gone long periods of time without thinking about it, but sometimes I re-trigger and have negative thoughts that I battle to this day. Now, up until this point, I've been the victim. But the shoe has also been on the other foot. I became addicted to porn, and it led me to eventually seek out escorts and massage parlors to deal with my emotions and everything being unfair. I kept my addiction a secret for 4 years until one day my wife found out. She was devastated, and in her mind it confirmed all of her deep-seated fears about being undesired and unattractive, which was partly what had made her vulnerable to have an affair in the first place. I didn't know if she would forgive me, but after agreeing to go to therapy and SA, she gave me another chance like I gave her one. It's been over 5 years now since I last saw an escort. She also dealt with me not being interested in sex at all with her for years while I directed all my sexual energy elsewhere. She believed that I had become asexual. Today, we are in a much better position in our marriage, but it's scarred with our past mistakes. What does this say about us as a couple that we are still together? I know most people would be out the door in both cases. We are 2 imperfect people who refuse to give up on each other. No, I believe you are the one who refused to give up. If you wouldn't have gone to HR on the guy, I'd be willing to bet this would have gone in an entirely different direction. No one is perfect, and I give you credit for sticking around. I knew immediately I couldn't and wouldn't. Thanks, I appreciate your kind words. I'm on the same page. Goodbye. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. We're all built differently, and I'm so glad I have no emotional baggage. Me too. The second I found out, I knew. He came scrambling home begging to fix things. Nope. I refused for my daughter to grow up and see me as the weak one. Best decision I ever made. Yep. Not for me at all. Like, I'm glad for you, but... yeah, no. I would have been out of the doorway before this. This marriage should have never happened in the first place. Holy shit, that's amazing. I'm so happy that your life went well from such an awful experience. It's crazy how in life, a lot of the really good things come from intense growth from really deep personal suffering. Mad respect, bro. Well, I hope you're both happy in this relationship. Every relationship have ups and downs, but yours are quite harsh. I don't think I'd be in this relationship for nearly as long as you. If you're here to seek confirmation of your choice, then it's a bad idea, because nobody except you is like you. Everybody can have an opinion, but nobody can say if their choices would suit you or not. And only future will tell if the choice you made to stick together is the good one or not. It's been 5 years without real trouble, so if you're both happy, I'd say it worked out pretty well. If you're here because you want to tell your story, well, I'm glad I've been able to read you, and I wish you all the best for your future. Good luck, man. Thanks, man. Just here to tell my story. I take whatever comments come my way. I may not agree with some, but it's interesting to hear nonetheless. Story 2. Wife of 6 years had 6-month affair with ex and destroyed our relationship. Rant. What a crazy train ride it has been. I'm 33 and currently going through a painful divorce, and thought I should share my story to help process the numbness and loss I feel and evaluate how this train wreck occurred. Me and my wife and I were co-workers for a time 9 years ago. From the time we met we were extremely attracted to each other, sparks flew and we hit it off immediately. I dated around a good amount in my younger 20s, but there was something different with her that made me feel safe and happy. After several years of dating and living with each other, we decided to get married. I remember even at the time I proposed, it didn't feel right. We had an open relationship mostly because she wanted that lifestyle and unfortunately went along for that ride. Never marry in a polyamorous relationship. Things definitely started shifting right after our marriage. With our open marriage we set the boundary, we'd only have fun with mutual friends and talk about agreements beforehand. Right before we bought our home, my wife admitted she spent a night with her ex-boyfriend and also later revealed there was no protection. I was devastated. That's where all the trust evaporated overnight, and even though I still loved her, I didn't feel respected anymore. I decided to put the house solely in my name. We bought the home when we were married, but this comes into play later in our divorce proceeding. I continued to progress in my career and being the breadwinner and thought my wife was happy. Slowly but surely the bedroom fun started to feel like a chore and could tell she was checking out. I should also mention my wife had a very high body count of men previous to our relationship. 2 years ago, right after the pandemic started, she pulled the rug from under me and let me know she wanted to break away from me and she wasn't afraid to provide for herself. She hired a spiritual coach and thought she could replicate that same amount of success right away. Fast forward to today, she is still struggling to launch her coaching business. Yay, being independent isn't so easy, right hun? Also doesn't feel very good with all the emasculation and treating me like garbage as I continued to financially support her. She deployed a lot of emotional manipulation to have me still provide and pay for her lifestyle. She convinced me to sleep in separate bedrooms. I did it to give her the space she said she needed. I really should have kicked her out of the house at that point. About a year ago she reconnected with that ex-boyfriend she had the affair with. To add on to the misery I was already feeling, she decided to commit to a relationship with him even though we are still married. Looking back, I feel completely disgusted with myself for not standing up for myself back then and continuing to allow it. She would often offer me affection and intimacy here and there to keep me ignorant of any of my dignity or self-respect, so I played along to earn any form of closeness with her. I was completely addicted and made her my world. The turning point was last spring after I took her to Hawaii for a week. It was my ultimate Hail Mary to win her back. We even did a couple's photo shoot professionally and had a really great time together. However, I could tell she was still invested in her AP. Not even a day after we got back from the trip she said she missed her AP. Again, I felt absolutely devastated that she would so easily cast away the time and energy we had just spent together. This is where I started to finally regain my dignity. I decided to play up to my image and try to walk away as unscathed as I could and divorce her. Not surprisingly, her and the boyfriend decided to move in together last summer. This is when I brought up to my wife I wanted an uncontested divorce. She was ripe with feelings for her AP, so when I wrote out the stipulation I'd receive the full equity on the house, my bank accounts, and retirement accounts, she agreed. I gave her a week to decide after another weekend of vacationing with her AP, and she signed the stipulation in front of a notary and I filed it the same day. She ended up going out to the bar that night with her AP, getting dolled up and spending another intimate encounter with him, I guess in celebration. Yay, I surely felt like a valued husband. 3 weeks after my wife wasn't able to get housing with her AP as originally planned. Now understanding her predicament, she filed a motion with the court to dismiss our stipulation and go to mediation. Go figure. I then lawyered up and we had several hearings with the courts. My wife never hired an attorney. I believe she thought her spiritual leanings told her she didn't need any of that. Well, it turns out she lost her case and tried filing an erroneous second motion with her newly hired attorneys and lost that too a few weeks ago. Now she's filed an objection to be heard by the judge. My lawyers are very confident the objection will also be denied and the final divorce papers can then be signed. I've racked up $10,000 of legal fees, but my wife also has a lot of fees too and may even be able to ask for my fees to be paid if I win, but I will most likely elect to pay my own anyway. Update/edit. Also, I should add, in the second motion she filed with her attorneys she made up lies about me coercing and lying to her. Things like I told her to not hire a lawyer because it was too expensive. The commissioner saw right through that BS and denied her, and hope the judge does too. When my lawyer read through that motion with me, he said there is no chance at reconciliation. Also, the hearing before the judge just got scheduled for April 5th. The finish line is so close now. Writing this all out, it seems almost too absurd to be true. I'm trying to survive the present the best I can, staying focused in my career and trying to enjoy playing piano and my other hobbies to not think about this. It doesn't help that my wife gives me glimpses of wanting me back, but the past is just too painful for reconciliation. I know I can find another partner that loves me and respects me, but for the present moment I feel paralyzed and heartbroken over this journey. Ultimately, I just want to move on with my life, and maybe I'll laugh at it all looking back one day. The universe has an interesting way of unfolding. Hope that karma works as designed. Also, any suggestions on getting her out of the home? I feel like I can't kick her out legally unless we're officially divorced. She has mentioned to me many times she fears me kicking her out. At the same time, she tells me she has other living arrangements planned, but nothing has ever materialized. Yes. You will find someone who loves you once this is done. She is a manipulator. Once she loses in front of the judge and the reality of what happens sinks in, she will try to manipulate you again. Stay strong and go after her to pay your fees. Shooting $10,000 for the hurt she has caused you is nothing. Stay strong and remember, you took her to Hawaii and less than one day back she yearns for her AP. Tell her the spirits say she will get hers in the near future. Best. Thanks. Yay, I definitely let her manipulate me, no question. She is also a narcissist, so she's going to be pissed if the judge decides to have her pay up. At least I know what's been missing in order to enjoy a fulfilling relationship, but will take a lot of work on myself first. Breaking away from the codependency is not easy. We hope that by sharing these stories with interested folks like you, we can help people recognize the signs of a relationship in trouble, and avoid so many of these heartbreaking situations yourselves. Have a good day or night, wherever you are.